Today, we delve into one of the most significant events of the 20th century, if not all of human history, World War II. We'll explore not just the events, but the transformations it spurred in societies and nations around the globe.
That's right. When we talk about World War II, we're talking about a conflict that touched nearly every corner of the globe and redefined warfare, politics, and society. So buckle up, because today we're going to let history's lessons guide us through this colossal and tumultuous time.
Let's start at the beginning. Although the roots of World War II stretch deep into the century's earlier conflicts, it officially began on September 1st, 1939. Does the name Adolf Hitler ring a bell? A man whose ambition knew no bounds and whose policies led to this devastating global conflict.
Exactly. Hitler's Germany invaded Poland on that day, prompting Britain and France to declare war 2 days later. This marks the beginning of a conflict that would last 6 years and change the world forever.
The war divided the world into two major coalitions, the Allies and the Axis. So, who were the major players on each side?
On the Allies' side, we had a notable roster. The United Kingdom under Winston Churchill, the Soviet Union led by Joseph Stalin, and the United States headed by Franklin D. Roosevelt. And don't forget China, with Chiang Kai-shek leading their efforts.
Then we had the Axis powers, where Germany and Italy teamed up under Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini, respectively. In Asia, Japan, under Emperor Hirohito, joined their ranks, their role predominantly marked by their attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941.
Most listeners might associate World War II with colossal battles in Europe, but it was, in every sense, a world war, spanning continents and seas from Europe to the Pacific, from Africa to Asia.
Each theater of war had its own crucial battles. Europe saw intense action with the invasion of Poland, the epic Battle of Britain, and the brutal Battle of Stalingrad on the Eastern Front, a turning point where the Soviet Union began pushing back against Nazi Germany.
In the Pacific, we witnessed the fierce island-hopping campaigns as the Allies closed in on Japan. A significant turning point was the Battle of Midway in 1942, a naval clash where the U.S. decisively halted Japan's advance.
This era was marked by military innovations. Tanks, aircraft, and strategic bombings blurred the lines between military and civilian targets. The war even introduced the atomic bomb, used by the U.S. on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, effectively forcing Japan to surrender.
And yet, amidst these battles, we cannot overlook the human cost, the horrific genocide of the Holocaust, where millions of Jews and other minorities were systematically murdered, showcasing the darkest capabilities of humankind.
Indeed, the war wasn't just fought on battlefields. It transformed societies, leading to immense civilian suffering through air raids, bombings, and occupations. Whole economies were mobilized for war, prompting innovations in industry and technology.
And after all the devastation, the world faced the challenging task of rebuilding and reimagining international relations. This gave rise to the United Nations, striving to create a forum for dialogue and prevent future global conflicts. The UN's creation signaled an unprecedented commitment to cooperation and peace, although the subsequent Cold War between the US and Soviet Union showed that the path wasn't always smooth.
You couldn't have said it better. The shadow of World War II loomed large, setting the stage for the decolonization movements across Africa and Asia, as former colonies sought independence after witnessing Europe's vulnerabilities.
It also led to significant geopolitical shifts as the US and the Soviet Union emerged as superpowers, making them central actors in the new international arena, the Cold War era.
And speaking of post-war shifts, can we take a moment to appreciate the sheer amount of human and material loss? Estimates suggest that up to 85 million people perished, more than half of them civilians, due to genocides like the Holocaust, bombings, and starvation.
Exactly. Among this chaos was incredible resilience and innovation. The post-war recovery saw remarkable advancements in sciences, technology, and the arts. Countries rebuilt, sometimes from the ground up, with new political ideologies and social systems starting to take root.
As we commemorate the details of World War II, we must ask, how does this history inform our current world? How do we remember, and what do we strive to learn from these events?
Such important questions. Each generation has faced the task of interpreting World War II's lessons, whether in how we manage diplomatic relations or reflect on human rights issues. Amidst new challenges, remembering these past stories grounds us. I think that's crucial.
You're absolutely right, and I think about how the society rebuilt post war. Those efforts couldn't be more relevant today as we continue to engage with global conflicts and international cooperation.
True, and like the leaders in the past, today's figures must navigate innovation, diplomacy, and human rights issues, all while learning to balance power with principles.
Exactly. With that thought, we'll wrap up today's episode. Thank you for listening to History Unpacked as we traverse the significant, sometimes harrowing journey of World War II. Remember to reflect on these stories and think about their implications for you today.
Thanks, everyone. Stay curious, stay informed, and until next time.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to History Unpacked. We're thrilled to have you join us for part 2 of our exploration into World War II, one of the most defining events in human history.
And welcome back indeed. We've covered so much in our last episode, from the roots of the conflict to the major coalitions that shaped the course of the war. Today, we'll dig even deeper, exploring not only the pivotal battles, but also how the war affected various aspects of life across multiple continents.
Absolutely. In part 1, we highlighted the key players in the global conflict. Now, let's take a closer look at the ideologies that fueled these nations and how they played out on the battlefield. We often talk about World War II in terms of strategy and tactics, but it's also important to understand the motivations of these leaders and how they justified such extensive campaigns.
Right, the ideologies were certainly a driving force. Fascism, advocated by figures like Mussolini and Hitler, promoted authoritarian nationalism, which opposed the democratic and communist ideologies of the Allied forces. The Axis powers weren't just fighting for territory, they sought to impose their worldview.
On the flip side, the Allies fought for democracy and freedom, though it's crucial to remember that they were far from a monolithic bloc. Each country had its own goals and reasons for being involved in the war.
Exactly. For instance, the United States initially remained neutral due to its policy of isolationism until the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941. This event dramatically shifted American public opinion, prompting the U.S. to join the Allies.
Indeed, and the entry of the United States into the conflict marked a significant turning point. Their industrial and military might added substantial weight to the Allied cause, ultimately helping to push the Axis back on multiple fronts. But let's not overlook the Eastern Front, where the Soviet Union played a colossal role.
Oh, absolutely. The Battle of Stalingrad is often cited as a major turning point in Europe. The defeat of the German Sixth Army marked the beginning of a persistent Soviet push westwards. The sheer determination and sacrifice by the Soviets were instrumental in turning the tide against Nazi Germany.
And speaking of turning points, how about the Allies' D-Day invasion of Normandy? This operation, known as Operation Overlord, involved meticulous planning and coordination, resulting in the liberation of Western Europe from Nazi occupation.
Yes, the Normandy landings on June 6, 1944 are iconic. It was one of the largest amphibious military assaults in history and required a staggering amount of resources, cooperation, and courage from the Allied forces.
The staggering logistics included coordinating naval, air, and ground forces across multiple nations. Such cooperation wasn't easy, but it was crucial for the successful breach of Hitler's Atlantic Wall.
Definitely. And beyond the military strategies, World War II also sparked significant changes on the home fronts. In the United States, for example, the workforce saw major shifts, with many women joining the labor force for the first time to fill roles left vacant by men who went to fight.
That's a great point. The iconic figure of Rosie the Riveter symbolized the era's large-scale mobilization efforts, showcasing women's contribution to the war effort and challenging gender norms of the time.
And across the ocean in Britain, the civilian population endured the Blitz, a relentless bombing campaign by Germany aimed at breaking British morale. Yet the spirit of the British people, famously encapsulated by Churchill's speeches, was indomitable.
That reminds me of how pivotal communication and propaganda were during this period. Both sides used media as a tool to maintain morale and sway public opinion, a a practice that popularized the use of posters, radio broadcasts, and even early cinema in warfare.
Indeed, control over the narrative was critical. The wartime propaganda shaped public perceptions and was used to justify and reinforce the war efforts from all sides involved.
We should also touch on the technological advancements spurred by the war. From the development of radar to the creation of the first computers used for code breaking, there were leaps in technology that have had lasting impacts on our modern world.
And let's not forget about aviation. The war saw innovations in aircraft design and strategy, leading to advancements in aviation that propelled future aerospace development.
While we're discussing technology, it's impossible not to mention the Manhattan Project, the top secret U.S. endeavor to develop the atomic bomb. The results were historic and devastating, with the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945 leading to Japan's surrender.
Yes, the usage of atomic weapons introduced a new era of warfare, raising questions about ethics and humanity's destructive potential. These events underscore the broad implications of the conflict's technological race.
The end of the war brought about a precarious peace and the onset of the Cold War. But it also initiated a period of recovery and reconstruction as war-torn countries, particularly in Europe and Asia, began to rebuild their societies.
This rebuilding process was significant, giving rise to the Marshall Plan, which aimed to restore European economies while preventing the spread of communism. It highlighted the United States' emergence as a global leader in the post-war era, providing substantial assistance to Western Europe.
And over in Asia, Japan underwent a remarkable transformation during the occupation, transitioning to a democratic society and experiencing rapid economic growth, a change that would later turn it into a global economic powerhouse.
It's important to note, too, the impact of decolonization that followed the war. Many territories in Africa and Asia saw the weakened hold of European colonial powers as an opportunity to push for independence, reshaping the political map.
Absolutely. And this upheaval laid the groundwork for many young nations to find their place in a dynamic post-colonial international landscape. These shifts still influence global politics today.
Coming out of World War II, we didn't just see nation-states reconfigure, but also the very conception of human rights transform. The Holocaust, in particular, led to an international outcry and the formation of the United Nations, seeking to safeguard human dignity and prevent such atrocities from occurring again.
Yes, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted in 1948 as a direct response to the atrocities committed during World War II, highlighting a collective desire to protect peace and human rights worldwide.
In reflecting on today's conversation, it's clear that World War II was a multifaceted event, not just a military conflict, but a societal upheaval that reshaped nations, ideologies, and ethics.
Absolutely. And as we move forward, it's crucial that we continue to learn from this chapter in history, letting these lessons guide our efforts in diplomacy, technology, and social justice today.
Well said. As we sign off, let's remember the sacrifices made and the enduring stories that inspire us to build a more harmonious world. Thank you for tuning in to this insightful conversation on History Unpacked.
Thank you to all our listeners for joining us. Keep pondering the past, stay informed about the present, and let's step together towards a better future. Until next time.